Hey guys, Cody here with Mercury Rising Astrology. It's that time of the week again where we go over the astrology for the week ahead to make sure that you're prepared. We are coming off of Mercury's ingress into Aries. We're coming off of the Sun ingressing into Taurus, and we're coming off of Mercury ingressing into Leo. So with Mercury moving into Aries, that's a cardinal fire sign ruled by Mars. And so this is going to accelerate our thought. Our speech is going to be a little bit more bold and direct. It wants to cut through the shit and get to the point. Neptune's there, confusing things. It's just a little bit, adding a little bit of haze. But once Mercury moves past Neptune, it will be clear, it'll be bold, it'll be direct, it'll be ready to get stuff done. We also have Mars moving from its fall in Cancer into Leo. We're coming off of that last week. This is a very different energy compared to Mars in Cancer, where we get stuck in our feelings, stuck in our emotions before we can take action. With Mars in Leo, it's ruled by the Sun, so it is valiant, it is courageous, it is bold, it is ready to express itself, it's ready to go after what it wants. We are coming up on a Mars opposition to Pluto, which will be interesting. I'll go over that for the week ahead. And we ended last week with a T-square between the Moon, the Sun, and Mars, where emotional objectivity met steadfast determination of the Sun in Taurus, and a kind of Martian assertive drive with Mars and Leo. And this heightened kind of the fixed sign tensions for the end of the week. So if you have a fixed rising sign or a fixed sun sign, you probably felt that T-square pretty profoundly. It was probably kind of some tension or some kind of obstacle that required some grit to get through. So coming off of last week, some of the big transits that we have coming up for the week ahead are Mars and Leo opposing Pluto and Aquarius. This is where, fixed fire meets fixed air. And Mars and Leo has this individualistic kind of assertion that confronts the Plutonian power and depth and transformation. So that'll be an interesting aspect we'll explore. We've also got the Sun in Taurus making a square to that Pluto as well. Instead of fixed fire meeting fixed air, we've got fixed earth meeting fixed air, so it's a little bit different. Efforts to, preserve our security in Taurus and build something sustainable and lasting faces a pressure to dig deep and to evolve and to transform with Pluto. So comfort meets change and growth, and that's kind of going to be a major theme for the week ahead. We've also got a new moon in Taurus, which is planting the seeds or initiating a new cycle in the Taurian part of your chart. Now this lunation will be square both Mars and Pluto, so there's this like added intensity, this added kind of darkness, and this kind of edge that Mars and Pluto add to that new moon cycle. We'll discuss that a little bit more. And lastly, we've got Venus making her third and final conjunction to Saturn in Pisces. So by now you should have learned the Venus-Saturn lessons, and if not, this is your third time to get it right, to lay the foundations, to get clear on your values, and to bring forward something lasting and something stable in your relationships. So this week centers on, assertion versus transformation, security versus change, planting new seeds, and a process of renewal amidst the chaos with the new moon as well. With all the Pluto-Mars stuff, there's this kind of feeling of a need to transform or a need to break free versus a grounded resistance or a need to be comfortable and stable. And, this is going to challenge new beginnings with the new moon with a sense of structured ideals. How can we bring in, that Venusian, Saturnian conjunction and build something that lasts and that feels a little stable amidst the fire and air kind of chaos of the week ahead? Before we jump into the details and the nitty-gritty of the week ahead, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with any of the astrological happenings in the sky and how they might affect you. I try to do these videos once a week so that you can know what's going on and you can prepare yourself. And if you like this content, make sure to like this video. It really helps the algorithm, and comment down below on how these transits affect you by the end of the video and what you see for the week ahead. Or if you're watching this video in hindsight, like how did these transits end up affecting you? What resonated, what didn't? It really helps me and helps others to understand kind of how these transits are manifesting in a variety of ways. So with that said, let's jump into the transits for the week ahead. Starting off the week on Monday, April 21st, not a ton going on. It's going to be a very anticipatory energy, a very kind of on edge energy as some of these aspects build towards the middle of the week. So we've got the moon in Aquarius. She doesn't make any huge aspects. She's separating from a conjunction with Pluto, and she'll make a sextile to Mercury early on. Otherwise, there's no aspects from the moon as she makes her way through Aquarius. We do have the Mars opposition to Pluto building. We've got the Sun square Pluto building, and we've got the Venus-Saturn conjunction building. So again, like I said, there's this kind of building energy that we're going to feel towards, the beginning to mid of the week. With the moon in Aquarius, there may be this detached, objective kind of feeling, this rational tone to the day. It's fixed air ruled by Saturn, so it fosters objectivity and a kind of systems level focus. Its separation from Pluto kind of, will ease a bit as we go through the day, but there's this renewed sense of power or discovering something hidden within ourselves, or a hidden truth coming to light early on or overnight that brings a sense of clear power to the morning. With a sextile to Mercury, there's this mental clarity and this sharp and awake sense of focus. I like this for getting stuff done on Monday. It's not going to be super in your face. It's going to be very subtle. However, I'll take any power and clarity mentally that I can get because I like having a sharp mind and being able to focus, especially on a Monday morning. It's going to be super helpful. Tensions will start to simmer a little bit on Monday as that Mars opposition to Pluto builds and that Sun square to Mars builds. There's, there's this feeling of the calm before the storm. You're coming off that conjunction to Pluto and the sextile to Mercury. Your mind is clear. It's in an air sign, objective, rational, logic focused in Aquarius. So there's this clear head in this sense of something building. It's this calm before the storm. It's a good day for planning, for getting together with colleagues or friends and having a group huddle and brainstorming and getting at ideas. Fixing any kind of tech things, if you're looking for getting a new phone or updating your software or anything like that, today's a great day for that. The moon in Aquarius is also good for objectively processing any of the transits from last week that are lingering a little bit. Given that there's not a ton happening today and there's this sense of building, I would take the time to kind of rationally look at where we went the last week or two and kind of process some of that stuff, because with the Mars opposition to Pluto and the Sun coming in and squaring Mars and Pluto, and the new moon squaring Mars and Pluto, there's a lot of anger and energy and assertion and aggressiveness and biting at the bit and this dark undercurrent with Pluto that, it would really behoove us to kind of get a clear sense of where we're at so that we can navigate that a little bit more productively when it comes. The moon in Aquarius will keep emotions cool, and that conjunction to Pluto will be fading in intensity, and it gives way to that kind of mercurial mental boost through the sextile. Again, no major perfections today, but the tensions are building. Focus on the quick wins and getting things clear and setting the tone for the rest of the week. On Tuesday, April 22nd, also kind of a quieter day. A little bit more action with the moon, but not much. She's still cruising her way through Aquarius. She'll make a trine to Jupiter in Gemini before squaring Uranus in Taurus towards the end of the day. Again, do not forget, we've got the Sun, Pluto, Mars, Pluto, Venus, Saturn shit all building. So again, this feeling of something of tensions rising in one aspect, but a blending of the Venusian Saturnian themes in another aspect. With the moon in Aquarius, she's still sustaining a detached, collective, systems level, objective-oriented mindset. With the trine to Jupiter, this will stir some expansive ideas or opportunities and shifts. Jupiter can also kind of scatter and kind of amplify, but it'll enhance a flow with the trine. The emotions of the moon will align with this mental optimism of having all these ideas, and the moon is okay, which ones are working, which ones aren't, being in cool objective Aquarius. So there's this synergistic kind of flow between the moon and Jupiter during the day. This sparks perhaps big picture ideas or social connections or opportunities in order to move ideas forward. There's this, expansion and insight driving curiosity and learning and social connections. Pitch ideas, networks, go to a social gathering, see what opportunities present themselves midday. Reflect on goals also to boost your confidence. Jupiter represents the big picture of things, and that can oftentimes include our goals and our aspirations and what we're doing. And with the moon's cool, objective, kind of logical take from Aquarius, being able to assess things from a distance, with this trine energy, get clear on your goals, kind of check in with where you're going and what you're doing and what new ideas or opportunities are presenting themselves that you're not taking advantage of, that you could be taking advantage of. Very helpful with the moon trine Jupiter, especially in air signs. Make sure not to lose focus. Jupiter can be a little bit scattered in Gemini and kind of present too much all at once and be a little bit overinflated and too jovial and too fun and not serious enough. So just be mindful of that. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue with the trine aspect that tends to make things a little bit more harmonious. Just be mindful of that energy. The moon square to Uranus later in the day will bring sudden disruptions or a jolt of, unexpected resistance from something. Expect kind of the unexpected. Expect changes in the plans. Expect, things that you planned for not to go as planned. Expect little disruptions here and there. It's a quick aspect, nothing major. But ultimately, with the moon in Aquarius, these shifts in our material world brought to us by Uranus and Taurus will offer us a new insight and offer us a new way of perhaps seeing things that we can use to innovate and to update our systems level focus in terms of how we see the world and how we operate in the collective. During this time, double check things, stay flexible, be able to adapt to any kind of changes, and just kind of keep your calm about yourself. Question any rigid habits you have, like what disruptions, when you're like doing your normal routine and something small disrupts you and it irritates you, it's like, why are you letting small disruptions or small changes that perhaps will be opening you up to a new way of thinking or a new opportunity? Why are you getting so, upset about that? Why are you resisting that small change so much? It's like, adapt a little bit, see what the opportunity brings. That sudden shift in your habits may, lead you to something new or to learn something about yourself or someone that you didn't know before. So, find a bit of freedom in that process and allow for a little bit of growth during those Uranian disruptions to kind of harness the flow. Again, I'm just going to mention it shortly. We've got Mars-Pluto building, we've got Sun-Pluto-Mars building, we've got Venus-Saturn building, and this is going to highlight that fixed sign friction, and it's going to grow as we, keep moving through the week. And with Venus and Saturn meeting for the third time, we're really refining our commitments, and, that's going to be hard to do amidst this rising tension of Mars and Pluto. So channel any restlessness you have into exercise or planning or, meditative exercise or something of that nature. And don't force things, kind of just let things be for now. There'll be plenty of time to act later this week. But as things build, just kind of get a sense of what's happening and where the lay of the land is going. Overall on Tuesday, seize networking or learning opportunities, stay flexible for any unexpected hiccups, and keep tensions in check as those things build. Save again those big moves for later in the week. Next, we've got Wednesday, April 23rd. We've got the moon moving into Pisces, where she will sextile the sun. And today we've got one of our tense aspects perfecting. We've got the sun in Taurus squaring Mars in Aquarius. Overall, with the moon in Pisces, it's a Jupiter-ruled water sign, mutable. This softens emotions a little bit. We're back in our feels from the moon's travels in Aquarius. It's less detached and more in tune with the cosmic undercurrents and the flow of the divine spiritual emotions in life when it's in Pisces. And the sextile to the sun fosters this harmony between our inner needs with the moon and our outer goals and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to shine with the sun. It's a nice little aspect to find some solace within the day and within the week. Later on in the day, we've got the sun building with a square to Pluto, and this ignites a tension between our need for stability with the sun in Taurus and the push to transform or to evolve with Pluto in Aquarius. So there's contrasting currents today. We've got a gentle connection meeting a kind of intense pressure. So again, we've got the moon in Pisces and the sun making that square to Pluto, so there's some tension there. Ultimately, with the moon in Pisces sextile the sun, emotions here will turn a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more imaginative, and that Piscean vibe really soothes, our soul, while the sun tries to ground that with something tangible and supportive in Taurus. It's a very subtle vibe through the sextile, but it's there if we take the opportunity for it. There's this harmony and this invitation to subtly support the sun in its process of transformation as it makes that square to Pluto. Tune into your feelings during this aspect and clarify any personal goals you might have, and make small acts of self-care or planning or kind of laying, the groundwork for some of the heavier transits this week. With the sun square to Pluto, there's this clash again between stability and an upheaval. A power struggle emerges of some sort. You have the center of the system in the sun. If you think about the solar system, the sun is at the center and it organizes the whole thing. So it's the central being or the central aspect, the king of the solar system. And it meets Pluto or Hades, the powerful leader of the underworld. And there's this square aspect, which is of the nature of Mars. There's a conflict there. So, the sun has a drive for security and stability and the slow and steady. This is my habits. This is my routine. I'm going to keep doing it and build for the long run. Whereas, Pluto kind of calls for this radical transformation, this bringing up of primal, raw, emotional depth and darkness into the consciousness and having to reconcile with it. In Aquarius, this might be thought patterns, for instance. And there's this tension here between the king and the ruler of the underworld. Like the king wants to have control. It wants to order things. It wants to have systems. And in Taurus, it wants to be stable. And those systems need to be grounded in practical matters and part of the status quo. And Pluto's being like, well, here's a bunch of stuff you didn't know. Here's some hidden truths. Here's some deep transformative insights. Here's some raw primal emotions that you pushed down as you tried to order and make sense of the world, and you didn't address these things. And so now it's time to address them. So with that, that sun square Pluto, expect challenges to control. There might be external demands or inner realizations that confront the status quo and push you towards a greater evolution. You may face workplace or financial obstacles. Stand firm and negotiate from a place of, stability, and try to do so in a way that's strategic. Confront any fears around loss or power and embrace this shift to deepen, your self-awareness and to build some resilience. Resilience is going to be a word for the week. There's lots of aspects this week that require us to cultivate resilience on many aspects. This is just one of them with the sun square Pluto. Overall, with the moon sextile to the sun and the sun square to Pluto, there's kind of a contradictory, paradoxical kind of, vibe there. With the moon in Pisces, it's soft, it's intuitive, it flows, it seeks ease. And the sun in Taurus, wants this stability, and it wants to take that kind of divine emotional inspiration and ground it into reality, but it's facing this confrontation with Pluto, the ruler of the underworld. So, this balances a calm reflection with the square's push for growth and for transformation. So maybe you can channel some of that moon and Pisces kind of energy to give you a more, larger, more divine, more intuitive kind of feeling as we work our way through the sun square to Pluto. There's a tug of war between surrendering and resistance, and that Pisces moon is really going to help us surrender to the process of transformation and not resist it as much. Lean into creative or caring tasks early on. Any kind of small act of self-care, taking care of somebody else, can kind of help with these energies. Reach out to a friend or journal towards the evening and stay centered. Address any conflicts that come up kind of directly and with patience, and adapt to things without forcing them. Pluto will force things, and Mars will force things, and the sun will force things. So especially in fixed signs, no one's really budging. So just be patient and kind of try to be flexible, even though it might be hard to be. On Thursday, April 24th, the moon is making a lot more aspects today, and our second major aspect of the week, Venus conjunct Saturn, perfects today. We've got the moon in Pisces making a square to Jupiter, conjuncting the north node, sextiling Uranus, and then conjoining the Mercury-Saturn conjunction. And like I said, we've also got Venus conjoining Saturn today. Also, don't forget, we've still got the Mars opposition to Pluto building, so there's going to be that underlying tension. So that's really the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest aspect for the week. The sun's aspect to Pluto, it's big, but it's a little quick. Relatively speaking, Mars moves a little slower than the sun. And so the Mars opposition to Pluto is going to be in effect for a little bit longer than the square to the sun. And oppositions are of the nature of Saturn. So they are a little bit more long lasting, whereas squares are, the nature of Mars. They're quick. There's a lot of tension and conflict and need to adjust, but they tend to be kind of quicker. So keep that in mind as we build throughout the week. With the moon in Pisces, again, it's emotional, it's intuitive, it's flexible, it's imaginative, it's romantic. We talked about those things yesterday with the moon in Pisces. Today, she'll make a square to her ruler in Gemini, Jupiter. There's friction between, this emotional depth with the moon in Pisces and a scattered kind of brainy, intellectual, curious nature of Jupiter and Gemini. The moon in Pisces seeks unity, big picture unity, through love and compassion and universal understanding. But Jupiter in Gemini is restless with ideas and is going a mile a minute in 100 different directions, trying to explore and understand and fact find. So, there's this in Pisces being ruled by Jupiter, exalting Venus, a water sign. There's this tendency to want to cohere and to bring things together into a unitive whole. Well, with Gemini being ruled by Mercury, air sign, mutable, and the time of year where Mercury is moving from light, or where Gemini is moving from light to darkness, there's this deconstructive quality. So you've got Jupiter in Gemini wanting to deconstruct all the facts and figures and all the ideas and everything that's happening, but then you've got the moon wanting to emotionally, bring together. And so again, that's why there's that square nature, that there's some tension between those objectives. With the moon in Pisces, creative pursuits will flourish, but the focus might wane a little bit, getting distracted by a bunch of different ideas with Jupiter and Gemini. With this aspect, it's a good idea to brainstorm those creative ideas, brainstorm any kind of ideas or kind of leads that you have and kind of, write them down, get them organized, but make sure you're prioritizing in the same breath. Like, we don't want to chase 100 different things that don't matter. We don't want to get scattered and distracted, which is Jupiter and Gemini can be prone to do. So stay grounded and avoid a disillusionment with that process. As we head into the evening, we've got the moon in Pisces conjuncting the North Node in Pisces while sextiling Uranus and Taurus. The North Node amplifies things and it gives this fated or destined quality to things. And Uranus is known as the innovator or the liberator or the Promethean archetype. So there's this pull towards greater growth, a soulful destiny with the North Node. And Uranus is going to bring these unexpected shifts or genius insights that kind of support that path in a subtle way through the sextile. So embrace new opportunities that present themselves, kind of take small risks that will pay off in the long run. This isn't anything huge, but you might find an opportunity to be a little bit more emotionally vulnerable, or an opportunity to support a friend through compassion and empathy that will kind of feel fated and feel like it's pulling you in the right direction and teaching you something about yourself, the world, and others. Watch for insights that reveal like what's truly calling you forward versus the distractions of Jupiter and Gemini. During the evening and overnight, we've got the moon making a conjunction in Pisces to the Venus-Saturn conjunction. Cue the waterworks, emotions merge with duty and with values and love. There's this sense of commitment with Venus conjoining Saturn that can feel a little bit heavy. We're getting real with and we're committing to our values or certain aspects of our relationship or finances or resources or creative pursuits, all Venusian things. And there might be this sense of duty, obligation, or, again, commitment that feels weighty because Saturn can be heavy. And with the moon in Pisces coming off the conjunction with the North Node, there's this meaningful kind of sense of fatedness and destiny in the process. Relationships, resources, or values demand clarity here, but it's tempered with a compassion and an understanding and an intuitive flow to the process. This might mean serious talks with partners that emotionally bond you, or friends, that you have a hangout session with that becomes kind of vulnerable and open, that benefits the group. It's a great time to get on the same page with the people around you. Lean into any vulnerabilities, to face relational truths in a way that's empathetic and compassionate and reflective of universal divine love. And ultimately, this will strengthen bonds. Ultimately, Saturn demands effort or some sort of sacrifice, or we have to put in the work to reap the rewards. And in Pisces, it softens this a little bit with an emotional sensitivity and compassion. And so with Venus, it's our dreams, it's what we value, what we want, and it's how we love and how we create and how we spend our resources. So grounding those dreams and those values and those relationships into a reality, a tangible realness, and embody those things in a way that's mature. Saturn is about maturity and wisdom. And being the third and final conjunction of Venus and Saturn in Pisces for this cycle for a while, we have Saturn leaving. So it might be a minute before we have another Venus-Saturn conjunction in Pisces. So take those lessons from that Pisces part of your chart and reflect on what endures in a Venusian way, whether those are relationships, your resources, your values, your creative pursuits, how you have fun, things that are pleasurable to you. And embrace limits so that you can deepen those connections and that sense of self-worth. Being human in human bodies, Pisces has this kind of big, flowy, kind of otherworldly feel that sometimes has a hard time being here with our limits. And so as Venus conjuncts Saturn for the last time, really reflect on how your limits can deepen connections with other people, how taking a humble approach to what you can and cannot do and accepting those limits and being honest with yourself and others through those limits, whether those are limits in relationships, limits in your resources, what you value and how you implement those values. Like those limits help refine you in a sense, and being humble and taking that process with grace and understanding we all have a different set of limits and that complement and contradict, and we're all here together to refine each other and to learn. That's really the lesson for me about Venus and Saturn and Pisces together, especially with the moon hitting this aspect, kind of amplifying that. Just kind of take a moment to reflect, throughout the day and especially in the evening on those types of themes. Again, we've got the Mars opposition to Pluto building, so there's tension underlying this whole process between Mars and Pluto. That assertive drive and that power struggles are building. Conflicts might be starting to bubble up here and there, and there might be a sense of urgency, a sense to make bold moves. There's a sense of restlessness underlying this process, so keep that in mind. On Friday, April 25th, we've got, again, Mars-Pluto building, so keep that in mind. But the moon is pretty busy. It moves from Pisces into Aries, where it conjoins Neptune very early on. The moon will make a trine to Mars during the morning. Then shortly after that, sextile Pluto in the morning. And by the afternoon, we've got a conjunction with Mercury by the moon. So overnight, the moon will move into Aries from Pisces. This goes from that imaginative, romantic, intuitive, and sensitive field of Pisces to bold, impulsive, emotionally, forceful and upfront Aries. Early on, the moon will make a conjunction to Neptune. This is a dreamy haze. You're waking up maybe a little foggy, feeling a little bit hungover, but there's this sense of inspiration perhaps, or these rose-colored glasses about the night prior. This might feel like a sense of confusion, but a sense of kind of being out of it, but in a way that is maybe transcendental. Explore dreams, maybe journal about your dreams if you had any weird dreams, see what kind of comes up from the subconscious. Meditate or do something grounding to really center yourself after that Neptunian transit. Throughout the morning, we've got a trine from the moon in Aries to Mars in Leo, which I really like, as it sextiles Pluto. This is really, on Friday, a get shit done kind of morning. Emotional energy will surge as that Aries drive meets, that Mars in Leo confidence. And it's feeling bold. It's ready to take on, big moves. And we've got Pluto adding this depth through the sextile, this kind of intensity and power and transformative insight, perhaps. Again, we've got the Mars-Pluto building. So there's this underlying aggression or tension or need to kind of blow off some steam. So be mindful of that. It's gaining. But I would use this trine from the moon to Mars and sextile to Pluto to really harness that energy and to really get stuff done. It's a very powerful transit. Being in two fire signs and one air sign, it's like Pluto is giving this objective kind of rational, cool power. Mars is giving you a heartfelt sense of drive, and the moon has the courage and the intensity to go after it. And it's all kind of flowing together a little bit harmoniously. So be mindful of tempers or being frustrated easily or having a sharp tongue during this time. Try to harness it a little bit more productively. By the afternoon, we've got the moon making a conjunction to Mercury in Aries. This blends emotion and intellect in a cardinal fire sign. This is going to sharpen our ideas and our sense of communication. That also means we might have a sharp tongue, so be mindful of the words that you use and the impulsive kind of nature that a Mercury in Aries can have when it melds together with the emotional intensity of the moon in Aries. Aries is very direct. It drives clear, assertive expression, and when the mind and the emotions are together, this will create a powerful force. Speak up, plan big, make decisive moves. There might be a sense of urgency. Make sure not to rush and to jump to conclusions, kind of temper that sense of urgency and kind of channel it in a way that's a little bit more powerful and less kind of, impulsive. Pitch ideas, communicate your needs with the moon in Aries, meeting up with the planet of the mind in Aries. Communicate what you need emotionally and don't be, afraid to do so. But watch out for arguing and temper flares, because with that Mars-Pluto opposition building and this being in Aries and the Mars being in Leo, that is one of the downsides to this transit. Overall, we wake up a little bit dreamy as the moon hits Neptune. There might be this kind of sense of bold action that's being inspired early on in the morning and this sense of sharp communication. Throughout the day, there's this push between imagination and assertiveness, but there's a supportive blend of courage and insight and emotional drive and, rational expression by midday to evening. So you can really kind of come out of that Neptunian haze in the morning and kind of get to work and maybe use that Neptune inspiration or that otherworldliness and kind of draw, insights from that in order to channel your expression and your actions in the fire signs as the moon and Mars connect. On Saturday, April 26th, we've got the notorious Mars opposition to Pluto perfecting, and we've also got the moon in Aries making a nice little sextile to Jupiter in Gemini. Hopefully that helps us out a little bit. With the moon in Aries, that continues to fuel bold, impulsive emotions, and the sextile to Jupiter will spark expansive optimism and some mental agility, and perhaps a little bit of a scatteredness, but I think through the sextile it might not be too terrible. It'll be a little bit more supportive. Maybe something new comes in that you're exploring. It takes you down a rabbit hole where you learn something more, that kind of nature. And then throughout the day, the Mars opposition to Pluto is going to ignite kind of a climactic clash between power and will. It's going to be a high stakes kind of day, I think. Saturday is kind of when any tensions that we're building throughout the week kind of come to a head, so be mindful of that on Saturday. Luckily, it's over the weekend. At least it's not like colleagues, maybe, unless you're working over the weekend. Maybe it's just family and social stuff, which, carries its own heft, but it's less, you can step away from your friends for a minute. It's hard to step away from your coworkers. But anyway, first off, we've got the moon making a sextile to Jupiter. There's cooperation with the sextile with the moon and Jupiter, giving emotions a kind of surge of confidence or a drive and a versatility to harmonize. This is, Jupiter in Gemini has big ideas and lots of them. And being an air sign, it wants to teach, it wants to learn, it wants to reach out socially, and Jupiter expands those things. So there's this sense of social outreach and networking. And there's this, drive with Jupiter wants to learn, and in Gemini, it's getting in all the facts and figures. So there's this opportunity and enthusiasm amidst the Mars opposition to Pluto to really gain some insight and to learn and to kind of see the facts and figures of the situation and try to make something out of it. The big transit of the day today is Mars opposition to Pluto. Mars in Leo is bold ambitions meeting Pluto in Aquarius, which is a transformative force, cool and objective. It doesn't care. It cares, but it's objective. It ignites struggles over control, authority, or identity, or all of those things. And there will be clashes or a drive to dominate or to overtake others or other people to overtake us. And in fixed signs, nobody's budging. It's like my way or nobody's way. No one budges, even though there's this demand with Pluto for flexibility. It's like Mars is like, I'm going forward. I'm doing it my way. Pluto's like, You can do it your way, but here's the transformation. This is the evolution. These are the deep, dark, raw, primal depths that you need to contend with, and whether you like it or not, here they are. Authority disputes flare up. People push boundaries that test leadership or autonomy. If you think of Pluto being in Aquarius versus Mars and Leo wants to be autonomous. It wants to do its own thing. But Pluto being this power of the collective, it's like you're meeting this opposition. It's like, how do I do my own thing in the face of this large sense of power, and on a systems level kind of scale? There's urges to control and to rebel and to act out of anger or, ego-driven desires, or things that have bubbled underneath the surface all week are now coming to a head and exploding, and you're reacting and you're being driven by that kind of primal urge. Stay grounded, emphasize diplomacy if you can over, just rash force. Channel any aggression you have constructively, maybe work out in the morning or midday to kind of ease some of that tension. Defend yourself during this process of any conflicts that arise, but be careful not to burn bridges. Again, strive for the diplomacy. If you need to go to your car and yell, if you need to go outside and just scream, if you need to go punch a pillow, like whatever you got to do to get that energy out so that you can come back to the table with a clearer head, do that, because that's going to be more beneficial. Like, you may look a little crazy, but it's going to be more beneficial than letting those raw, primal, kind of deep, powerful, transformative emotions just like take you over and you just react and do something brash and you're not thinking. It's almost like a pressure cooker today. It's like those things when you're making rice, they always kind of scare me because you always have those videos of like rice cookers exploding, but it's like 9 times out of 10, they don't explode. So it's like, what are you doing today? Are you going to hold the lid on tight and just let the steam out slowly and let your rice cook normally? Or are you going to like blow a gasket and is your rice going to go all over the fucking place because you couldn't keep the lid on it? Weird metaphor, but that's what I'm sticking with today. Just be mindful of that energy and try to channel it a little bit more constructively. Again, the moon sextile to Jupiter will subtly support this process a little bit and give us an opportunity to channel that aggressive opposition into a little bit more constructive and flexible dialogue, hopefully. The sextile to Jupiter adds a lightness at least midday to the kind of the heaviness of the Mars-Pluto transit that may, you might underestimate conflicts that happen early on in the day, or you might not think so much of the tensions that arise, but at some point they need to be addressed, so keep that in mind as well. Network or plan early on, get some social connections in, but try to stay diplomatic once that, Mars-Pluto stuff starts coming into play. And again, progress over control. And don't be forceful. The goal isn't short-term dominance that burns fast. The goal is steady, long-term progress that endures. And a lot of times you have to do that in a way that's diplomatic. If you, force your way forward and try to dominate over other people or vice versa, and you burn all these bridges in the process, how much do you think that's going to endure? Sometimes bridges need to be burned. And if that's the case, burn the fucking bridges. Who am I to stop you, right? Only you know what bridges need to be burned. But oftentimes I find ourselves, myself included, burning bridges that don't need to be burned out of spite, out of arrogance, out of naivete, out of childishness. So keep that in mind. That's all I got to say about Friday. Keep that in mind. I wish on Sunday, April 27th, I could tell you things lighten up a bit, but they kind of do. But they kind of don't. We've got the moon moving into Taurus, which is the lightening up of a bit. It's a groundedness. Instead of the moon being in a fiery sign, fueling the Mars-Pluto shit, it's going to be more grounded and more practical and slower to act and more inward facing, which is going to be helpful coming off all the tension that we had on Friday and Saturday. The part where the tension doesn't lighten up is that as soon as the moon moves into Taurus, it's going to make a square to Mars and Pluto. And we also have a new moon on Sunday. And guess what? That new moon is square to Mars and Pluto. So that Mars and Pluto isn't going away on Sunday. We might be coming at it from a more calm, more grounded, perhaps more stubborn kind of, angle with the sun or with the moon being in Taurus. But that tension between Mars and Pluto is very much still there, and it's going to be baked into the new moon. With the moon in Taurus, those fire emotions get grounded again. There's this need for stability and emotional resilience and peace amidst the pressure of Mars and Pluto. That square, though, that the moon will make from Taurus creates some friction. You know, those Taurian needs meet the tension of Mars and Pluto, and this will, you know, maybe stubbornness meets this clash with external demands. Like, you want to sit at home and be comfortable and do your routine, but there's this like demand externally for you to take action or to do something you don't want to, and you're being stubborn, but you're like being pulled into this situation. You know, it's going to test our patience a little bit and force our priorities and get us to think about those a little bit differently. This might mean disputes over resources or control, or interpersonal tensions may flare up a little bit on Sunday, especially following the Mars-Pluto opposition, depending on what you did and what happened or what happened to you. So confront any urges today, you know, especially with the moon in Taurus, to dig in. This is all happening in fixed signs, and I cannot stress enough that fixed signs can really be immovable. Like, that's kind of their nature. They don't want to move. And that's good if you're right. And that's good if you're in alignment. And that's great if you really have something worth fighting for. But oftentimes we can do it out of ego-driven reasons and things that don't really matter, and out of spite or out of just, you know, just because. So be mindful of that. So amongst that, you know, moon square to Mars and square to Pluto, we do have a new moon in Taurus. You know, this starts a new Taurus cycle, and whatever house Taurus rules for you in your chart, this is a new beginning, a moment of seeding, a moment of planting a seed that will grow over the course of the next lunation cycle into something fuller and bigger. But it begins under pressure. Taking that rice cooker analogy, you know, it's like we're planting a seed in a rice cooker, and there's tension and there's pressure. And if you know anything about plants or people, wherever you're planted or situated, the environment and what you're exposed to doesn't necessarily determine everything, but it has an influence on how you grow and the outcomes of the plant's growth process. And so with the new moon being seated in Taurus, being square Mars and Pluto, the environment in which this seed is being planted is one of Mars and Pluto, but also of Taurus and Venus and Earth and those kinds of things. So the seed that's being planted is going to carry an intensity, and it's going to demand resilience over time as, you know, it faces obstacles or power plays in its process of maturation. This is initiation through struggle and empowerment in the process. Set clear boundaries during this time, build slowly, and focus on durability. Again, this isn't about quick wins. This is about building something that endures. Embrace challenges as catalysts for growth, and clarify long-term goals and desires. And being an earth sign, this can be projects, businesses, resources, finances, values, those types of things. And particularly in the themes of the house that Taurus rules in your chart, make a promise to yourself to release a rigid control of anything that you are trying to kind of force or control in your life, and strengthen your resolve a little bit and adapt and allow some changes and allow a little bit of flexibility in that process. Overall on Sunday, the moon's focus is on immediate comfort in Taurus, and that's going to be kind of, you know, battling against this need to transform and this need to take bold action with the Mars and Leo. And with this initiation of new beginnings in the process, the moon isn't going to be as comfortable as it wants to be. Luckily, it's exalted in Taurus, so it's doing really well, and it balances this friction a little bit, but it urges patience ultimately to align our short-term needs with enduring long-term goals. Being in a fixed sign, you know, all of these, we got the moon in a fixed sign, we'll have the sun in a fixed sign, we got Mars in a fixed sign, we've got Pluto in a fixed sign. This deepens this struggle because they don't want to move. And it requires us to build flexibility and get ourselves out of the rut. You know, they say when you're in quicksand that you like move a lot, it like makes it worse. This is kind of that feel. It's like you're stuck and you got to figure out a way to like get out of it and to move forward. And it's not going to be by quick, brash movements and actions. It's going to be strategic. It's going to be enduring and slow, and it's going to be a process that builds, but you're going to have to hold that pressure a little bit. That's why if we took the Venus-Saturn conjunction to heart and we got clear on our values and what matters to us in terms of relationships, love, resources, creativity, all those things, when we get to this Mars-Pluto opposition and we get to this new moon in Taurus, we're going to be clear on what our values are. So we will be able to sit with the tension, knowing that we are clear on where we're going. It's very important so that we don't, get into stagnation or face a stalemate of any kind, and we can take the pressure and thrive under that environment. Tackle any practical tasks that need to get done, but stay grounded today and set realistic goals and avoid power struggle. Again, use diplomacy and build for the long haul. This isn't about quick wins. It's going to feel like you want a quick. There's going to be lots of urgency. I just caution against the urgency. Use that urgency to prioritize and to get clear on where you're going so that you're not making irrational decisions that blow up and lead to something that you don't want. That's pretty much what I got for the day on Sunday. Overall, this week, the word of the week is resilience. There's lots of tension. There's moments and windows of harmony, of, lightness. And I think those were kind of clear throughout the week. But ultimately, this week it feels very tense. And there's lots of energies that are either squaring or opposing each other, creating this sense of urgency or this sense of tug of war. There's, early on, there's this escalating tension that peaks towards the end of the week over the weekend. And there's a need to navigate power and depth and intensity, but also a need to be grounded in the way we start things and the way we initiate things. Mars and Pluto this week will test our drive. It'll test our ambitions and our assertions throughout the week. Personal ambitions with Mars and Leo will be pitted against collective power and secrets that are revealed, bringing maybe work disputes or competitive standoffs or inner power struggles of some sort. And that Venus-Saturn conjunction is going to solidify, our commitments to our values and our relationships and our creative pursuits, drawing ideals that meet a practical endurance, hopefully. The new moon will launch us into new things, but in the pressure cooker of Mars and Pluto. So there's some strain there. These challenges ultimately over the cycle of this lunation, I think, will, foster growth, and it'll demand, again, the word of the week, a little bit of resilience in the process. Being a new moon in Taurus, I think of Taurus as being like this earthy, stable, steady, enduring earth sign. It's like I'm just gonna one foot in front of the other until I get where I need to go. I know what works. I know what I'm doing. But then you have this Mars and Leo that wants to act fast and fire, meeting Pluto, and it's almost like this lunation cycle is being set up to teach us resilience in the face of those tensions. How can we find calm and peace and serenity and groundedness in the tensions of life? That's really what I think this whole lunation is going to be about. Keep an eye out for it over the next month or so. Overall, it's a time this week to plant seeds for a stable and enduring process and try to avoid any rash, kind of angry, impulsive actions this week or words this week. So, that's what I've got for you this week ahead. Again, a little tense, but I think there's some moments in there that you can really take advantage of to stay grounded and stay connected and to lean on each other in order to make it through this a little bit easier. I hope you guys got some kind of insight out of this. As always, please like this video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below on how you think these transits will unfold for you. Which houses are they hitting for you? Do you resonate with any of this stuff? I would love to hear from you guys. And as always, until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.